Hi, welcome to Podlygamists, the Sisterwives rewatch podcast.
Sisterwives is a reality show centered on a Mormon polygamous family originating in Lehi, Utah. Over 12 years and 16 seasons, TLC's longest-running reality show tells the story of Kody Brown and his 4 wives, Meri, Janelle, Christine, and Robyn, and their journey as spouses and parents living plural marriage in the public eye. As superfans, we have watched the family as they grow and overcome challenges, endure numerous moves, face loss, and celebrate all the moments in between. We love the Brown family, and fresh off some major changes following season 16, we decided to go back to the beginning and embark on the ultimate rewatch so that we could see the early days with fresh eyes and try to draw connections between the Brown family of 2010 and where we are today. I'm Samantha Kaiser.
And I'm Hailey Graff.
And this is Podlygamists, Season 1, Episode 5.
Okay, so welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us. Episode 5 of Podlygamists.
Mm-hmm.
It was a fun episode and also a big week for the Browns, so we have a lot of current events to wrap up at the end. I'm excited.
Yeah, this is probably going to be a jam-packed episode, so...
Our goal, just a little bit behind the curtain for the audience, is to keep it under an hour, and we try so hard. And Sam edits her ass off to try to make it interesting and fluid and not an hour and a half long, because it easily could be. So this summary is a quick one. First Wife's 20th anniversary. Season 1, Episode 5. Kody prepares to celebrate his 20th anniversary with his first wife, Meri. Where do we start? Let's see.
Well, so it's been an eventful couple weeks for the Brown family, because Robyn's there, and Truly is there now. And now it's Meri and Kody's 20th anniversary.
And they're making a pretty big production out of it, which I was kind of happy. Not only do that they get into their dinner plans, but they have a big vacation. So,
yeah, I was really glad they did a trip together for it. So,
for sure. I think we kind of we just start with, they're getting ready to welcome Robyn with her wedding into the family, and a tradition that we learn about with the Brown women, the moms, I guess, is that they get each other a claddagh ring.
I looked it up. It's spelled Claddagh. It's Irish. Claddagh.
Okay, that sounds more like what they were saying, so that sounds about right. But so do you have some information on the significance?
Well, I just looked it up because I was like, is this just their family thing, or is it popular? It's popular. It's from Irish heritage, and it symbolizes love, friendship, and loyalty, which makes sense for them having that in their family. And it also, I found this interesting. I don't know if the listener will, but I just like looking up stuff like this because I just want to learn. But it can be used to determine relationship status of how you wear it. So if you're wearing the ring on your right hand and you have the little heart thing that's in the ring facing your fingertips, that means that the wearer is looking for love, single and ready to mingle. So single ladies.
I guess they're wearing them the other way then.
Right.
Browns.
So they must flip theirs around, but apparently that's how you show that you are looking for a fella.
I have heard that. That's the only. I didn't really know anything other than there's a significance to that direction, and I actually have seen them around on Friends and stuff. I don't know if they always use them as a mating call necessarily, but
a mating call.
But it's a cute Irish kind of heritage thing.
Yeah, and so I think that's nice. That's a nice way to kind of bond the wives together. And
I mean, when you describe the symbology, it's pretty or the symbolism, it's kind of perfect for what the goal of their relationships are. So that is a very sweet thing, and it's nice that it's a nice gesture to Robyn for to signify the importance of her in their lives and vice versa and that kind of thing. So I think that's a really nice gesture for sure.
And I also this is another insight to their personalities. I just love that Janelle was very practical. We need to pick the least expensive one, okay? We're not made of money.
She even doubles down in the confessional, and she's like, "Listen, for me, it's about cost. I don't care what you."
It doesn't matter what it looks like, okay? I didn't want to spend $300 on a ring.
Yeah, which funny, as far as jewelry and especially something similar to a wedding band, that's real cheap. Like, so I was just kind of giggling a little bit. Like, what are we thinking? Like, we could have gone to Claire's, I guess, if we were trying to save $5. Like,
not by the mall. Like,
it just made me laugh a tiny bit. But I mean,
that's just classic Janelle, as always, just practical and like, we don't have a ton of extra money for this.
Yeah, it was kind of endearing. I thought that little very awkward shopping trip to the jewelry store where they do get into a little bit like what it's like when someone kind of digs into their relationship and says like, oh, and this is for, what's it for? And they're like, oh, just because. And they're like kind of got their guard up a little bit. They don't want to get into the polygamy discussion or like have that. I think Janelle said,
and I don't blame them either, because I'm kind of like, I hate when people do that to me, where they're like, when you go to just like an Applebee's and they're like, are you out for a special occasion? And I'm like, don't worry about it. I'm just out to lunch. Okay.
That seems a little different. Like they want to give you a free dessert or something.
Yeah. And I know it's like their corporate structure is telling them to ask.
Yeah.
Like, but it's annoying. I'm like, I know you don't care, and I don't care to share. Just let's keep it distant. That's just me, but just mind your business, Applebee's servers.
I'm sure they have a sensitivity to people prying. Just even if it's not the intention, it's just like they just are like, no, none of your beeswax, lady. Like that's just kind of they have even if they're not going to be like truly prosecuted for their way of life, like it's just inherent in them to like kind of fear or like have their guard up with the public. It's just how they've been like
and just that judgment that they'll see it and be like, oh, you're polygamous.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing is that I shed a little light on this for me today was looking at the map of Colorado or of Utah, today because I was planning a trip to Utah and I was looking at, where Salt Lake City is and where St. George is and they live around St. George. I don't know if it's like in St. George proper, but it's not far from Colorado City, which is where truly like fundamentalist extreme community of polygamists and Mormon fundamentalists. So having that stigma so near them of like actually very serious concerning behavior within polygamy and the families and that kind of and like the way that they operate, I'm sure it doesn't help their like brand that they're also polygamists within like, I don't know, less than an hour of Colorado City. And while clearly just walking down the street, you can tell they are not from that community. They wouldn't be dressing that way and all that.
Are they wearing like the more traditional, like the dresses and the
conservative? I don't know. I just kind of put a light on why they are so sensitive because I'm sure there is a different stigma for people in that area than there is for us. Anyways, if we move on to like the next kind of scene, if you put it that way, we've got Robyn getting really excited about their merging of families, I guess, and like all that, and she's doing a who's this in the picture with her little daughter Brianna, her youngest. And she goes, who's this? And she goes, Kody. And she goes, who? And she goes, Daddy. And it's like, ugh. Like that was so weird and forced. Like, I get it. But also she does have a dad who's alive and like.
Yeah, and again, like we don't know how involved he is or whatever in her life, but I mean I assume knows who her real dad is. So I don't know, you couldn't just like easily transition into calling this new guy Daddy, like
being trained to say Daddy versus like her like a couple
coming
months
to that naturally.
They've only been together for a few months. Like it's like a very quick turnaround.
You probably only met Kody a handful of times. Like, why am I just gonna call this relative stranger Daddy?
Yeah, I was just like, ew. But
like,
she's also
like time. She'll adjust.
I think Robyn wants them to be part of the family like 100% as soon as possible, and I understand that given her like how deeply she feels about family culture and all that stuff. Yeah. But it just was a scene that was kind of like cringe a little bit.
Like just it'll come, but just like things take time. You can't just immediately have. Yeah, like don't push it yet. She'll give her time. You're not even married yet, so.
But whatever, different culture. Also, the picture cracks me up. That picture she has of all of the parents studying a chessboard, like kind of like leaning in, and there's no pieces. And I'm like, what photographer is like, oh, it'd be cool.
Let's go to the park. Find one of those chessboards.
And then she goes, but then Robyn has like a really deep explanation for it. She goes, I really like this picture because like there's no chess pieces, and it's kind of like we're all really looking for something and really really worried about it, and it's just not there. Sometimes it's just nothing, and I'm like, is that
makes sense only in your head, but that's fine.
If that's what it means to you and it makes you happy, I guess fine. But like to me, I was like, this is hysterical, and I did screenshot it, and it is on our Instagram.
It looks like a cheesy stock photo, like
yeah,
where you're like, we just needed something to fill the space, so we're like just gather and have some people, and look, a chessboard adds like a dynamic to it.
And what scenario are that many people involved in like?
Chess is a 2-person activity.
I mean, so is marriage. I mean,
so is marriage.
Good analogy, I guess. Maybe Robyn's not wrong.
That's hilarious.
Sure. I mean, okay. I'm on board, Robyn. You're right. It does have
all right, you know what? Now it makes more sense that you're like, traditionally 2 people do this, but we're going to force it and make 5.
It's going to be harder and clunkier and a lot more awkward, and
we're doing it.
Yeah, we're going to do it.
That's too funny.
That's very funny. Then, we get into the talk with Mariah. I think that's next. Is that on your to-do list?
That's what I have next, too.
Okay. I thought this was It's really endeared me to Kody because he so much reminded me of my dad in this scenario. Like, he's trying to, like, be serious and have a serious adult discussion with her, but he's, like, kind of cracking a little smile because he's proud of her. You know what I mean? That whole, like... So, basically, to back up a little bit, Mariah holds a meeting with Meri, her mom, and Kody, and says she wants to get out of public school because she wants to go back to private school, which... How this correlates to the next thing I'm not that clear on, because Kody makes it sound like their private school is really just a homeschool co-op, and that most of the kids who do that end up having to get a GED anyways. So it's sort of like, I don't know if this is going to help you get into, So anyways, but then she says the reason she's doing this, which I don't know, again, the logic is fuzzy, but she's also like 15, so she can have it, is that she wants to go into the military, and she wants to go to the Naval Academy. And Kody is just, like, bursting at the seams, trying to, like, have a serious, like, make her realize the seriousness of this conversation, but also, like, so proud that she, like, has this idea.
And she wants to go to the Naval Academy and become a doctor and, like, have them, pay for her education to be a doctor. And, like, those are really big goals. And she's just, like...
research, and she's, like, also... Yeah. And then we kind of figure out the pride. Like, yeah, of course, you're proud of your child and he says that he's like, and I think you're smart and stubborn enough to do it. And he's very, like, encouraging. And, like, I just, like, really, like, my heart just, like, warmed to their, like, interaction so much because he was so encouraging. And so,
and he was tearing up, too, because he was just so happy to hear that she had, like, ambitions and stuff,
And just his encouragement of her. And he's like, and I think you're smart enough and you're definitely stubborn enough. And I'm just like, sweet. Like, he is the type of dad where being stubborn is a compliment, and that's when I say that about how he reminds me of my dad in that case. I was like, my dad also would say that, like, Aww. You're not gonna let them, like, push you around whenever you're stubborn, or
Yeah.
That was sweet, and it was endeared me to Kody, and, like, I think we need to highlight those moments too, because I think it's easy to watch this and be like, screw this guy, but, like, he is a good dad who means well, and, like, I think he gets in over his head in coming years. But I think it was the path to something is paved, or the path to hell is paved with good intentions, or something like that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think but he's also so much. We'll get into this later. Never mind.
We'll circle around.
We'll circle back. Yeah.
So I mean, then we're kind of going into him and Meri.
Yeah.
Their relationship, their big milestone anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
They're gonna go out to a fancy dinner and getting ready and stuff. And I wrote this down because I knew you'd appreciate it, with Kody fluffing his hair.
I wrote that down as well. So Kody's really excited about this restaurant they're going to, Lakai.
Which, holy cow, that restaurant! Oh my goodness,
it was beautiful.
stunning. It looks like it belongs in like Austria or something.
And did it look familiar to you at all?
It does.
Did you do the deep dive too?
Yeah.
I was so excited to reveal this information to Sam. I was like, I recognize this building, so I looked it up. I said, someone got married here. I know they did. And then, freaking sure enough, Lakai, because, okay, listeners, Aspen gets married at Lakai in the future, and like, it's a stunning venue. I'm sure it's not cheap, but
I looked at their whole website and stuff. I mean, that's what they do is catering and weddings and
they even have lodging. I saw, which I was curious about. Man, you just stole my thunder so hard. I did all this. I didn't do a deep dive on anything except for Lakai, the restaurant, where like Kody said, if you tell people you're going to Lakai in Utah, they think, oh, you think you're something special. Like this is the place in Utah, and I'm thinking, man, Utah is at least like 6 hours from corner to corner, so like that's at least you're really up this place. It was It was sweet that like they went all out in his opinion to celebrate their anniversary and have a really weird, like very extreme sparkler dessert that was like
big, very big.
And they were like quietly just like, huh, that's really cool. Like just like
that reminds me, like short aside here, I have a friend who's from Germany, and so a few years back I went and visited her for the first time over there, and we took a road trip to France and got some crepes, as you do in France, and her husband ordered like a flambe, which means that they're like set afire. And the guy at the restaurant was very, very excited to come over and set them on fire. And we had like our bags and stuff on the table. And he comes like running up with this torch. And we're all like, oh my God, no. But like moving stuff quickly as he's just like lighting the table on fire, basically. We were like, okay, take it down like 6 notches. But
maybe it's like a French restaurant thing then.
I mean, this is a French restaurant. So I mean, maybe. But it was just a lot of fire really close to your face, and you're like, I don't know how I feel about this.
That's funny. Interesting. Well, I'm not gonna lie, my you'll really let a lot of air out of my balloon.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to disappoint you there.
It's okay. They kind of get like into a little bit of a tiff over dinner.
They start to have like some kind of serious discussions, which I don't know. You think you'd want to have like fun chats on your anniversary, but they decide to like go in it, I guess.
Yeah, I wonder if it was like prompted by the producers or anything like that. It's like, and now let's talk about this. But like, yeah, it's not like the topic I would have brought up at this time, I guess.
No, I would have just tried to like be in the moment and enjoy and just talk about like happy things and memories, maybe, and
like memories together, right? But Meri kind of like reflects on how they met Robyn, and then pivots into how she struggles with jealousy with Robyn, and I'm just like, it's so like, it's so hard because she did bring like usher Robyn in kind of, so it's like, oh man, it's so hard to like get it, but also I get that this is a tenet of like a faith I don't have, so I don't really get it in the first place. But yeah, that was interesting. And then also when she pulls out the analogy that every single freaking person does when you talk about polygamy, well, can the women marry more than one man? You know, that's like the classic line that everyone has. And she says, but she actually says to him, how would you feel if I was giving attention to another man? My dog just farted.
Oh.
Sorry.
We'll see if it comes back on the recording. If
he does a thing where he just like will sit down and go just like a little toot. You know what I mean? Like a little toot. It's just so funny.
Okay. I mean, it's kind of cute.
Yeah, it was just like a little toot. Okay, that was very funny. Anyways, she makes the comparison like, what if I was giving my attention to another guy? And his reaction is so like extreme to the point that like it's not like he's even trying to understand. Like, yes, the way she said it, I guess, is weirdish, but like what his words are, the vulgarity, like he calls it the vulgarity of trying to imagine you like married to another man or giving attention or like being with another man. It goes against God and nature. He's so like he's got a lot of conviction in that, and it was so like she's not proposing she have an affair. She's saying,
Right.
imagine if the tables were turned, and maybe
Just
be a little more sensitive to me.
use your empathetic skills here and put yourself in my shoes.
It was a little hard to like sit through and like, but also at the same time, it's a much more convicted Kody than we know today. He's using
Mm-hmm.
a lot more like language and a lot more like prudishness almost.
Yeah.
What we're used to now, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. What did you think about that?
I mean, I couldn't help. I was getting pretty annoyed, like watching it. I feel like it was kind of hard not to. I I wrote down. I mean, again, like the vulgarity of it
Word.
against him,
Yeah.
and again the wrong to God nature. And then he says how it seems hypocritical. I don't know how to get around it, and I feel like I'm admitting that I'm doing something completely and totally unfair. And I don't even know if I can even comment there. I feel like
Doesn't
that
that say it
speaks
all?
for itself.
Yeah.
You know, I'm
But
just gonna kind of sit back and be like, okay, you said it, not me.
and yet though, it's just because then he gets into like, well, I know this is not what Meri needs to hear in these cases. He says you chose this, and he says the excitement you had for Robyn was affirmative to me. So stick with me. I kind of understand Kody's conflict.
I do a little bit in that he is confused that Meri can seem so okay with it and facilitating it on the one hand, and then so insecure and upset about it on the other hand. And he's like, the hell? Like, what are you? Which is it? I can understand him being like, you're pushing me to do this. Why are you then getting mad at me for doing it?
And if this is what they're called to do, which is what they believe
Mm-hmm.
at this time,
Mm-hmm.
he has to choose between pushing past everyone's feelings to like follow and like answer their calling
Mm-hmm.
and being empowering and progressive to his wives, which I think he is as much as he can be at this time with his, where he's at. Like he progresses, he does progress. They all
Mm-hmm.
do in the
Right.
family, and even though they seem so not in this stage with like very traditional roles and like Kody's kind of like he's kind of the antler. Kody's kind of head of the house attitude, which he always has, but like it's much more like followed and clear at this time.
Mm-hmm.
They're still way more progressive than like Warren Jeffs and these communities that are way more so like it probably is a thread that he is pulling that leads us to where we are today where he's like not even sure of polygamy and of his conviction. And so it's just like I feel like he at this time is trying his best to be a good guy and give his wives power and empowerment and yet live this very conservative, not progressive lifestyle and religion and like the faith is just not. It's just not accommodating to empowerment and like and modern progressive attitudes towards women and marriages and relationships and gender roles.
Right.
You know what I mean? He's in between
He's in a tight
period of
spot.
time.
I mean, he makes the comment too, like, there's no way I can win here starting this conversation.
Which again, in hindsight, I disagree. He could have been more supportive, and he says that later. And years later, he does say he should have been more supportive.
I think his biggest downfall, honestly, is not necessarily the choosing polygamy or choosing to add Robyn to the family, whatever. I think it's, and we'll see this in the tell all that we'll talk about, I think it's honestly his lack of empathy for his wife's feelings of jealousy and feeling left out. And I don't think it's not, I don't think that he doesn't want to feel for them or doesn't, care enough. I think I just don't know if he has, like, again, with the emotional intelligence, I just don't think he's, like, super capable of that. And it's not an excuse. I mean, you should be taking the time, especially if you're going to be in not one, not two, not three, but 4 marriages. Emotional intelligence and empathy should be skills that you have in your emotional tool bag. But him at this stage in his life, and even we'll see present day, I just think that he very much struggles with that. So
he's in a crisis. Like present day, he's in a bit of a religious crisis, and I think it starts with this where I think, because the way this faith is laid out, it's not progressive, and he wants to be a faithful person at this time.
mm-hmm.
So it's just like, it's so contradictory. That's the word. That's what it is. And it's like, it puts him on a track to where he kind of like drives himself crazy a little bit, I think, and he just kind of tosses his hands up at a certain point. But he's still got the energy and so much conviction at this time. I know I keep using that word, but it is. He quotes, they go on their beach vacation. He goes, "Isn't it great to know that God made this?" Like, he's just so much more faithful. And
I think God and religion are much more of his daily life and thoughts than perhaps what becomes
later.
Mm-hmm.
And later the damage is done to the point where, like, with or without his conviction, like, his relationships are already too far gone.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I don't know. It was interesting. It gave me a lot of, like, I did swing the other way. Everyone tends to swing towards the wives, like,
mm-hmm.
But I did think, like, he thought he was following orders in some fashion, and, like, he's torn between following those and not, and pleasing the wives currently has. So, well, to pivot to some times that looked great for between Kody and Meri, we go to Mexico and see some darling home videos of them playing in the ocean and just having a good old time. And again, Kody just looks around and goes, a real Ned Flanders moment of, like, isn't it great to know that God made all this? And, like, well, I understand the sentiment, and, like, how that's probably, like, a common thing that they said in the family like that at that time. It was just so, like, so not the Kody we know today.
It was much more positive,
innocent,
less jaded.
Yeah, that's a good, yeah. It was, I don't know, it was interesting. I wrote down, Kody's godly conviction is a whole different person, and then I made that same quote again about the beach and God. I don't know.
The only thing for me that was kind of like a dark spot on their vacation, because I was really enjoying seeing them, like, getting along and seeing them have their time together, but then where he brings up the freaking in vitro without like, the way he brought it up, he wasn't like, hey, how do you feel about in vitro? Seeing as it is Meri's body, Meri's the one who has to go through everything. But instead he's just like, I think we should do it. And I was like, you missed a step. You missed the step where you asked what she thought about it. Mm-hmm. And her face during that conversation was not super thrilled. It bothered me.
Isn't that classic Kody, though, to, like, get excited about something and kind of bulldoze?
Again, though, the emotional intelligence is not there.
Not there. I think he really thought it would be something she would undoubtedly want. Mm-hmm. And he says later in the confession, like, I was dumbfounded. Yeah. I didn't know what to say. And honestly, like, given my impression of Meri up until now, I would have thought she would have been at least more game for it. Maybe not, like, totally, like, immediately, like, knew she knew immediately she did not want to do that.
But maybe wanting to consider it more.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I would love to have known more of her, like, thought process about why it was such an immediate gut, like, no to that.
I honestly wonder if she just was at the point where she's like, I can't take another heartbreak of it, and then to try even harder with in vitro, and then to have the possibility of that fail. I think probably just was the thought of that would be too much.
That
that was why
look at the
how I
financial investment too. I kind of wonder at this time because they do talk about how
yeah,
expensive.
it's like $20,000 or something, isn't it? Like,
Yeah, it's not cheap, and that's like for one round, and that there's no guarantee
yeah.
it works, and like people go into major debt trying to pull this off. And this is where we get into more like alternative options for Meri to have more kids in the future, like in later seasons. I'm not sure when it comes up again, but there's a very like interesting plot line that comes up surrounding that topic.
Mhm.
And the thing I wrestle with is like I personally have a moral kind of thing about investing tens of thousands of dollars in producing your own kid when like, and this is not me on my high horse. This is genuinely how I feel when I think about celebrities and people who just dump tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of dollars into in vitro and surrogacy and all these things when there are like so many kids without a home and a family alive on the planet right now
Mhm.
that like it like strikes a nerve in me, and it's not justified. Like everyone has to do what's right for them, and if someone feels uncomfortable with that, like then they shouldn't try to adapt because then maybe they won't give that kid the home that they need, I guess. But like I pivot and I think as a polygamous family, is adoption even an option for them? Probably not, right?
Oh, I mean, we do see with Robyn's kids.
But she's the mom. She's their mom.
I know, but still, I mean,
I
they
guess.
still are adopted into the family, though.
I guess Kody adopts.
So
Maybe it is then. Maybe it is. It's never discussed to my knowledge. I don't recall any kind of consideration of adopting
and I mean, think about
from
it
any of
down the
the
line,
wives.
like, spoiler alert here for those who care. But I mean, with some same-sex couples that we'll eventually see in the family, that will probably come into play at some point if they decide they want children.
But like that's an established. That's something I know happens. I know that at same-sex couples adopt children. I don't know if polygamists because they're maybe it's Utah
Maybe they wouldn't
because
get
Utah
approved
does
for
criminalize them
adoption.
at this time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering. And by the time they get to Nevada, if it's too late, kind of for Meri, or not too late for Meri, but like she's just moved on from that whole idea altogether, maybe.
Maybe we should again make our open invitation more public again to Mr. Jessup, is it, on the Facebook group?
Lopez, Moroni Lopez Jessup, isn't that his full like tag?
I believe it is. And again, if he would ever care to discuss how the Mormons feel about adoption, we would love to hear.
Turns out you're actually a big time celeb. So, Mr. Moroni Lopez Jessup. So, like, please shed some light.
Right?
Um, yeah.
Inquiring minds. So.
I'm curious. I'm really curious because what a good opportunity if they want so many gosh darn kids. What a good opportunity to get some kids who like actually are in need of a home. Maybe it's something to do with their faith and like their belief in spirits that are already, part. There's that whole thing we kind of got into a couple episodes ago about how they believe that the spirits of their children are already there and they just need to bring them into the world, kind of thing.
But then I have to wonder, like, couldn't you see the spirit of another child though? Like, couldn't that child's spirit also belong in your family?
Yeah, I don't know.
Does it mean that you have to share blood for it to belong with you? Because the wives are family, the other kids, the kids who are not their biological kids are family. Could this not be the same with adoption?
And Robyn's kids are not even Kody's kids, and they still consider them
they share no biological
ties,
brown DNA. Like,
so interesting. And she does talk about how hard it was to lose that baby that they. And I can imagine they were just probably felt it was so meant to be because it happened by surprise after trying for like 15 years.
Yeah.
Or like, I guess 12 years. But, and they probably thought, this is our blessing.
Our miracle baby,
Yeah. And then they lost it. And and I'm sure that was, Kody even says it was they needed to do some soul searching. It was scarring. It was like a very painful thing to go through. And like, I can only imagine for anybody, again, I can't personally speak to any of that experience, but for someone who has so deeply wanted a baby for so long, for 15 years, So you tried for Mariah for 5 years. I was like, oh, that is such a long time to keep the faith.
Right.
And like clearly someone who loves children and like loves the other children so deeply, like it just like kills you and it just seems unfair. It feels so unfair.
I know. I mean, there's a lot, and like this will be, it's a recurring thing that happens with
Yeah.
with Meri and their relationship and stuff too. And I don't know. I mean, there was in one earlier moment too in the episode that I didn't want to like. I hated that it happened right after he was being so sweet, like with Mariah, and I loved it. But he was like, "Oh, you said you wanted to talk to me, her and Meri," and he's like, "I thought you were gonna announce that you were pregnant." And again, this was him. I mean, I don't think anything that came from like a place of trying to be hurtful, but again, it's one of those things that Meri is sensitive about, and it just seemed like I'm like, does she feel really sensitive about it though? Because you keep making these sort of comments, like him being at the doctor, being like, "I've got a wife who only has one. Let's talk about in vitro," and it just seems like you're constantly reminding her of this quote unquote failure of
Yeah.
her to have more children, and I wonder if that just adds to the pain,
Yeah.
and it made me like hurt for her a little bit.
I know. I kind of breezed past that and because I had it written down too, but just that little passing comment, and it's just like
Mhm.
she goes, "Oh, did you really think that?" And it's just like I just I think he just doesn't think, and I'm
I
not
think
I'm
he's
sure he's
again.
ill.
We're just gonna say it a bunch of times. Just not emotionally intelligent and not able to put himself in his wife's shoes very well. And like that is a skill, yes. Like learning empathy and stuff isn't something that naturally some people don't naturally. I can't relate to this because I'm like a really like sensitive person that I feel other people's emotions. So this to me is like so obvious what he should be, how he should be acting or feeling or what he should say. But again, everyone's different. So he is one that this doesn't come as naturally to him to be that empathetic.
What just occurred to me too as you were saying that is like it's always Cody's always a passing comment, always rushing to conclusions, always jumping the gun. Like that's just his brand through and through. And I'm just like he kind of doesn't have time to self improve. Like he's always moving forward to the next thing, to the next kid, to the next event. Like he's maintenance mode all the time. It's never like stillness for him. So I kind of wonder if that's just it just stunts him. It just stunts his ability to like reflect on himself because he's
I
always doing the
absolutely
thing
think
for
so.
yeah.
Because I have thought that myself. I was thinking like last week, just kind of reflecting on some of his stuff, and yeah, I was thinking the exact same thing that he is so busy that a lot of times when his wives will make certain comments in the confessionals, and it's like brand new to him, like he's like sort of stunned by the revelation of something that they say, and then you sort of like want him to respond to it, like Meri saying, thinking about leaving, that she's like, my reason for staying, is basically Mariah and my commitment and stuff. And he doesn't say anything. Like, he doesn't say, well, no, you should stay because I love you and I want you to stay. Kind of the things you would want to hear if you're talking about leaving a marriage. But I'm like, at the same time, he probably hasn't heard this before and he's probably just processing. And he probably just,
And then
I
he
really don't think he has the time to like,
and then that processing stops because he's on to the next thing pretty quick. Like
exactly.
and not like intentionally. It's just like when you have 100 people in your family, there's something coming up all the time. So
Mhm.
you might sit down for a second and start thinking, and then you get a call or a text or a kid screaming, and you got to go do the thing that whatever that is. So it's
Exactly.
like yeah, totally. And yeah, the thing where he like finds information in confessionals is so true. It's just like where he goes, you kind of see him just go,
Yeah, he does this kind of like pulling back and sort of like a confused
yeah,
look on his face. Yeah. And I'm like, that's because he's never heard it and he's
yeah,
taking it in for the first time and he doesn't know what to think of it yet because he has no time to think.
yeah,
I mean, my whole thing with Kody is I both get frustrated with him and trying to hold him accountable for things that he can change,
yeah.
but then also looking on his side of things, I do feel empathy for his situation of being confused by different emotions and again bouncing back and forth. Like it's not as simple as just being like this guy's made a bunch of mistakes
Yeah.
and decisions that we all hate, and like
Yeah.
it's more than that. Like
How boring. How boring to just be like, what an idiot all the time. It's
right.
like no one is that simple. Like
No,
not
we're all
not
complex
an idiot.
human beings. Like
He's
there is more to him than just like the
the culture and the context. It's all that's the part I find interesting. And I don't think it's interesting just to hate him. I wouldn't watch a show if I just hated him. I don't.
Well, no, because I mean, we see plenty of moments where we do see like our dads in him,
Yeah.
and we do see this kind of dorky dude who's like endearingly dorky. Like, I mean, you have plenty of moments where you get a kick out of him and stuff, and I do think that he has good intentions throughout it. It's just it's a very difficult situation to navigate
To be in,
perfectly.
find yourself in now after like all this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel for him because I think he is just a simple person. I think at his like he is a simple person with like simple you could see his like flashy shit and think he's like not, but I do think he's a simple person with simple desires in life and he just like built this crazy family and this crazy life that like inhibits him from becoming a better person.
I think so.
But what do you do? But that's not a solution. That doesn't provide any solution. So it's just that, and that's where I'm like, all the haters on the social medias and stuff like that. I'm like, how uninteresting just to talk about how you think he's such a dick or whatever.
I mean that's the thing. I've really enjoyed doing this podcast because it is very easy, I think, to watch the show and just kind of hate on it and hate on his behavior, especially in what we'll see in recent seasons and stuff, that there may be a little more cause to get angry with some of his actions. But I think it is super interesting that we are trying to be like, but from Kody's point of view, this is what's happening. And I think it's a great exercise in just thinking about people who are different than you. Again, I mean, that we don't do that enough in today's society. Like I've said it before, but we don't put ourselves in the shoes of people who are different than us. And it's not going well in society. Like,
Yeah.
for us to not do that,
Yeah. I mean, if there's evidence of that, it's the freaking sorry people on Facebook who are like on the fan pages. But gosh darn, I see some just depressing shit on those pages about like everyone's what they're willing to say about a stranger that they see on a reality show. The hate, the true like evil hate that is directed at these people when they like like a 5% of their life because of what you see on a TLC show. But I digress. I could say that every week because it makes me sad, but also at the same time, there's some good discussions that can happen. Because
I just think it's more interesting to have discussions to be like, okay, we're not letting you off the hook for something that's not good behavior or anything, but we are trying to look as for reasoning to it and not just casting you as like a villain for doing something shitty. There's more to people than that.
I think that's kind of how we end the episode is like on the confessional about that situation, right?
Yeah, it was basically just.
Did we explain that you painted the picture of he proposes in vitro as an anniversary gift?
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't remember if we actually like even stated that happened or if we just got into our feelings about it.
Right.
So do we start with current events in small news articles or do we start with the last tell-all of season 16?
Oh boy, I think we should start with the small news articles first,
So it's
and then get into the meat of the tell-all.
Yeah, yeah. A little palate cleanser as we wrap up season 1, episode 15, manifesting, episode 5. Like Christina's left. However, from what we understand, via Peyton Brown, they're still recording for the show. And in addition, Christine has a baking show or a cooking show on TLC.com. It's called Cooking with Christine, and it just launched as of following the tell-all of this past week.
And I believe some of her kids show up on the show as well.
Great. That's lovely. I mean, Christine's I enjoy her. I've always enjoyed her presence. I'm happy that she has her own, that is a thing that is her own in this. And I'm sure it's not like cashing in big money for her or anything, but I'm sure she enjoys it. She's been kind of the cook of the family throughout the years, so it's a really cool use of her like her individual talent and her individual like personality that just is shining. Like she's a great presence for TV. So like great. I'm glad we have another venue for that. Yeah. So that's on TLC.com. It's Cooking with Christine. In other news, it was announced via the fan pages that Under the Banner of Heaven is coming out in like a docu-series or like a docudrama on Hulu. Which, for those who like have missed all my comment, I don't know how much is edited out about how much I reference Under the Banner of Heaven, but it's a book by John Krakauer, who is famous for like Into Thin Air and like what's the other one, Wild.
Into the Wild.
Into the Wild. He has a book about a murder that happens in a polygamous Mormon community, and there's a lot of background and a lot of really interesting info just about the foundation of Mormonism, the foundation of like where polygamy came into play, where it came out of play for the mainstream Mormon church, and like that kind of stuff. Super interesting. The least of which is the murder. The murder is like a part of it, but really like it's a great context for like what is Mormonism today. So that being said, they're making that into a docudrama, but really excited about it. I think we're gonna do some kind of book club with Under the Banner of Heaven following season 1.
Just because I haven't read it yet. Hailey has told me multiple times to read it. I have to get a copy of it first, but Hailey has read it, really enjoyed it, and we would love to discuss it. So anybody listening too, if you want to get a copy of the book, and we will eventually do probably a bonus episode talking about it.
I don't know. Did you have anything else before we get into the last episode of the? Just hit me that way. We don't have any more Sunday episodes coming up for quite some time,
right? I mean, I think that was kind of the last of what I had of anything. So we can get into the tell-all that we all discussed.
So I don't have a ton of notes just because like so much of it we've referenced a lot.
Mm-hmm.
There were some key points. Christine says we are divorced. She just says, she like clearly states, I think it's the first time we hear like that is where we're at right now. She has moved out. And they kind of interview each wife about their feelings about that, which was interesting. They're all in very different places.
Mm-hmm. Well, like we were discussing too, that I noticed the copyright of the tell-all was filmed in 2021. And obviously it's still only February 2022 right now. But Christine, from what we understand, it was announced in November of 2021 via like their Instagram and stuff online that she and Kody announced that they were done.
Mm-hmm.
So they must have filmed this tell-all then either in later November, December. So very soon after the announcement was made that she left.
Yeah.
So they haven't had a ton of time to really process this huge change to their family.
Which is an important context to like their reactions, I think, because they do seem very raw and they do seem in so many different places. So like we go to Robyn and she's upset, she's angry. And she says
you seem kind of shocked and stuff too, like.
And she says that I don't understand how you can give up when you haven't even tried. She says I'm very upset about Christine's, or I want to get that part right probably. She says she's devastated by Christine's choice.
Yeah.
There are two things there. So much to unpack there because I think anyone else in the family would object to the concept that they didn't try. Or / that Christine didn't try. Because I think Christine tried.
And Janelle fully admits in this episode that they did try for a long time.
Yes. She like makes that abundantly clear, and I kind of just trust her opinion on that more.
Because she comes at it with a little bit more, she's less emotional coming at it. Like she's more logical thinking it through, and she has been there the whole time.
Say it like it is if it weren't the case, I think. Yeah. And she's also been with Christine for much longer. And I mean, at this point, Robyn's been in the family for a long time. It's not that she's not, but it's not the same as like those early days, the connection that they could have.
Janelle's seen it right from the very start, so.
Yeah. And she where Robyn is like, I don't believe you can quit if you haven't tried. And I'm like, and then she said she's devastated by Christine's choice. And I can't help but feel like she's saying Christine hasn't tried and Christine's choice. And it's like, Christine, if I had to project or assume, she tried and Kody didn't. And so she did toss her hands up because she was tired of waiting for him to also meet her where she was at and try too. And I think they did for a while. We see some therapy in earlier seasons. We see a much better connection and relationship. It takes a sharp, hard turn in the latest couple seasons that took me by surprise, to be honest. I was talking about this with a friend the other night, coincidentally, about a relationship that we're both like familiar with of two other people, about how like they make a drastic move. The woman in the relationship, you make a drastic move to just like plead for a reaction from the other person, and the other person's either too prideful or too unaware or too busy in this, too busy minded to even clock it. If you have three other wives, like maybe you're not even clocking like some actions that she's taking to try to like, a cry out for like something. And Meri's still kind of in processing mode. She doesn't have a lot to say other than that she's still kind of getting used to it, which points to the fact that this is very recent for them still.
Right. And again with Meri, that her and Christine's situations are very close to each other, given their lack of intimacy and real actual proper marriage with Kody. That Meri doesn't really have that. And Christine says, we see in the end of the season before this where Christine is, on the property at Coyote Pass, and she's saying like, I can't do marriage with Kody, and Meri's walking away with her, trying to convince her, no, like look at the mountain, look at like this life that we're building all together, and then Christine says really that kind of backfired though, that she was like, I just looked at Meri and I looked at the way her relationship is, and she's like, I don't want it. I don't want that.
Yeah. Ouch. I mean, like, we covered kind of in last episode, like, Meri is making her own choices, and I believe she will choose what she wants, and she wants to be a part of this family still. But, like, Christine has her 6 kids of her own that she will be a part of her life and no matter what. So, like, I think she feels the freedom to leave more than Meri does because she has so much stock in her relationship with the rest of the kids in the family. And she says that, actually, we didn't mention this in episode 5, season 1, when she says, when I think about my family of 21 at that time, was 21, and then I think about that turning to a family of 3, it feels empty. And Christine at least has a family of 7, and their spouses and their grandkids. Like, she has a whole family of her own to fall back on.
And I don't think anyone, again on Facebook with people judging Meri for her choice or whatever to stay, but I don't think anyone would begrudge Christine for not wanting that. I mean, Meri can, if it works for Meri, well, not super ideal, but if she's making it work for herself, again,
she's choosing it.
Choice, great. It is what it is. But we also, no one would blame Meri if she was like Christine and left for wanting something different.
Yeah, no.
Because everybody deserves love in life. Everybody deserves the kind of relationships that they crave. And yes, life is the way it is, and not everybody gets those things. But Christine has an opportunity here if to just even loving herself more than she has in the past, where she says, I'm dating myself now, and I'm getting to know myself, who I am, without that relationship and everything. I'm like, she seems very happy doing it, and I'm very happy for her.
I agree. I don't know if there's a whole lot else to.
I mean, that's the big part of it, really. Like that Kody didn't really want to talk about it too much. Like it's still kind of pretty raw for him too, and I think mainly him getting so sensitive about it, talking where he's like, I don't want to talk about Christine anymore. And for me, I think it was honestly because this is him getting rejected, and he hasn't experienced that. Like the rest of the wives have experienced.
her so much first, you know, like I guess he's not used to the reverse.
Because look at last episode where Robyn's with the Barbies and they're all fighting over the Kody doll. And so but that's kind of how it is in real life, that they're all fighting for Kody's time. And now you have a wife being like, actually, I don't want your time. That's got to sting a bit, even if it's not somebody that you're really wanting that sort of relationship with anymore. It's like when you apply for a job and you don't even really care if you get the job, but then they tell you didn't get it. And you're like, but why? Like, why didn't you offer me that? That hurts. Like, even if it doesn't break your heart.
He's not used to not being a commodity in that household, like at all. Like, I guess in polygamy, when you set yourself, when you're the man, like everyone is vying for your time. Every person in that family is vying for your time. That's an interesting thing to think about. That's great.
Oh, I said I want to do a quick shout out to one of our new viewers, our coworker Wah.
Wah!
Who has not watched the show, but has watched the podcast.
Aww.
So he is debating watching the first season, though he says, which I said you probably should, because then the podcast will make more sense.
Don't subject yourself to this podcast if you haven't actually understood. We're not that interesting just on our own.
No, I can't imagine just like watching us without the context. I feel like it would be so boring. So
What is a beautiful human being, and I appreciate his support. I know he's just a supportive person, so that's lovely. I appreciate you, buddy.
So hopefully you watch some of the episodes just so you're not just as bored watching this. But thank you so much for your support. We appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
So, personal shout out. If anyone else wants a personal shout out, email podlygamistpod@gmail.com. We'll be happy to give you a shout out.
DM us. Anything. Any kind of interaction, I'll take it. If you write a review, let me know. And then follow us on Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Rate, review, subscribe, email us at podlygamispod.com with any questions, any shout out requests, anything at all. Any interaction. I'm overjoyed every time I get a notification on my phone. So.
All right, I guess that's it for this week. So.